Josh Eggleston, Salem Chief Financial Officer.
Stahley, City Manager.
Brian Martin, Public Works Director.
Alan, Engineer. And I think I didn't introduce myself at the start, so I'll finish here. I'm Connor Reiten with PNGC Power, and I also have the honor of being a co-chair of the Business Advocacy Committee. And so we are going to have about, I think, 30 to 40 minutes to do presentations here. Feel free to come up and use the podium here. We're also going to try something a little bit in the Q&A section. I've got a pretty robust group here online. So when you ask questions afterwards, if you don't mind hiking all the way up to the front, ask your question from here, and then you can go back to your seat, and we'll see if we can make a good show for the folks online this morning. So with that, I think I'm just gonna kick it off. I don't know who wants to get started here.
I'll jump in.
Want to jump right in?
Sure.
If the city would prefer to present the Zoom audience in here, you all just fine.
Right.
That's your preference.
I'll stay here because I'm going to be brief. I'm Stahley. I'm the city manager, and thank you so much for having us this morning. We always enjoy our time, or usually enjoy our time at the chamber. This is our second visit this week. We had another robust conversation on Monday about our budget and our financial forecast, and I thought that was a productive conversation. I suspect the same will be true of the work that we do this morning. We're going to be talking this morning a little bit about our budget and our budget process with Josh, and Alan will be talking about our bond program and where we are with that. We are literally off to the races with the bond program. It's great to see those projects starting to actually hit the ground, or at least hit the bid sheets and our RFP process. So stay tuned for more about that. And I guess with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
I'll go ahead and kick it off. And then
Right.
I'll turn it to Alan. Alan has a
On with the show.
presentation and the cool slides. I don't know if we could.
Josh has
Josh has got it. We'll start. Just wanted to talk about how the projects are spread out. I you all saw this a couple of years ago, but developed a pie chart that really shows where the funding is at. And glasses, I'm actually gonna go to the podium, so I can see what I'm talking about, even though I should have this memorized by heart. You can see the green half there, over half of the money is going to streets and sidewalks, so that's really the biggest chunk of money. 28.4 million is going to go to park upgrades. 39.5 million to the Civic Center project to upgrade it so it's seismically resilient. So when you look at those three projects alone, that's almost 3/4 of the bond funds. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the delivery of those funds here in a minute. Quickly, I'll talk about the technology and cybersecurity, 17.6 million, affordable housing / library branch of 7.5 million, additional affordable housing opportunity funds at 10 million, fire engines equipment 26 million. So look at this pie chart. The engineering division of Public Works is going to be delivering basically the green, the blue, and the pink, and then parts down here in the fire with the fire stations. And that's, I'm going to turn it over to Alan in a minute, but what I wanted to share is that's a lot of work. So when you think about, we already have had our normal workload that we focus on. This bond's got a pretty, got a lot more significant. Happy about it. How we're going to be delivering those projects is our engineering division. We have about 55 personnel that work on project delivery and delivering projects. We're also using consultants as project managers. A lot of the work will be hired out to consulting firms to do the design. So, you know, through that team of staff, consultant project managers, consulting engineers doing design, that'll cover the design end. And then of course, it's a local contracting community. Once we get the plans done, we should head out into the construction. So most of the work, so all of the green and the portion of the blue, those are typically the design bid build format where we go with bids. The Civic Center will be a little bit different. We look at something like that. We're looking at a design build form of delivery for that one. Fire stations would most likely be a design bid build with a low bidder again. Then the others are a little bit more complex and, you know, we use specialty consultants for some of the IT stuff and other things, but the majority of the work will be by the traditional method, but then will be a portion of the design build, which is alternate contracting, and then the rest is a little bit more specialized. So that's how we're staffed up to deliver the projects and the programs. There aren't any questions on that. I'll turn it over to Alan and we can talk about specific projects and how things are stacking up.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Always let your boss talk first is what I've. Just maybe a couple other things and then we'll move through the slideshow here. One other thing to mention that we're doing sort of for program administration of the bond is we have a site committee, mayor and 2 councilors and then 2 community members that we would meet with monthly. Councilor Varney is members to just go over progress and talk about any policy issues that might be rising to the council level. So we've got robust conversations with them and oversight with what's happening with the bond.
And just to add to that, Mike Herron serves on that.
Correct.
committee. Mike, of course, is known to the chamber.
Right. And then the other thing I guess I wanted to say is over 10 years, I think everyone knows that the intent of our program here was that we could keep a level tax levy. So the way the funding is going to come in through us and our finance manager can give us more details here is essentially in 3 tranches of funding, about 100 million in each installment. So we have that first installment in the bank that's been done, and we started work immediately to get the program in place, start getting designers on board. And I've been impatiently waiting, as Keith said, to get through that process so we can start to actually get some work towards construction and see construction happening in the community. So we're getting to that, and we'll talk about what's happening there. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Josh. Just some metrics that we're keeping track of, and sorry, some of it's kind of behind the bar there. Thank you. And this is information that we're talking about with the bond oversight committee, keeping track of expenditures to date. As you can see, the big green chunk of the pie chart is fire equipment. That's one of the biggest things we did off the bat is acquire the new fire equipment for the fire department. And the rest of the categories are essentially designed for projects that are ongoing right now. I will mention the program administration number. That includes all of our finance charges for that first $100 million bond issuance. So that percentage of the pie should go down as we build construction and everything else. The other thing that we're tracking for our oversight committee and for everyone is local vendor participation. We know this is probably something that's of interest to this group, and just so that we know where the money is going and who's doing the work. So you can see we've awarded about $6 million. All of that is essentially design work at this point and project management. This is outside of the fire equipment, and about 77% of that is to consultants or project managers that have an office here in Marion or Polk County. And we'll keep watching that as we go forward. And the portfolio of folks that are working on jobs for us will grow as we get to construction. Go ahead and go to the next one, Josh. What I wanted to do next is just kind of focus on some of those sectors that Brian mentioned and let you know kind of what's in the package, and then I'll talk about the construction of what's coming up in the next couple of years. So in the transportation, which is more than half of our package, we got about 21 million for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and that is happening in a few places. The Pringle Path connection from essentially Commercial Street Bridge near City Hall to Riverfront Park. There's partial funding there to go with the grant that we received for that project. Union Street, we're adding on to the work that's been happening for the bikeway connection that eventually will connect us all the way from the Union Street pedestrian bridge to the 12th Street Promenade. So adding on to the work that's already been funded by Urban Renewal in a previous grant that we got. And then adding bike lanes to a section of State Street. The biggest section of the transportation sector is really a few urban standard upgrade projects. We're taking basically streets that have no curb, no sidewalk, open ditches, and upgrading them to a full urban standard with bike lanes, full sidewalks, and the kind of infrastructure you expect from a city street. So those are big projects that take a long time to get geared up. We need to acquire right away in some cases, go through permitting. So a lot of those will hit later in the program, but they include Davis Road, Pringle Road, Fisher Road, McGilchrist, which is actually going, there's an early phase of that work that's not bond funded going on now. And then a new street, Marine Drive over in West Salem. We have about every year, starting this year, some pavement rehabilitation and replacement. We're essentially going out, grinding off old pavement and replacing it. And those packages will be happening all over town starting this year. And a lot of those projects, we also have ADA curb ramp upgrades that go with that. That's required when we do that type of work. 4 bridges are being rehabilitated at 15th, 17th, and should have brought my glasses so I could read my notes. 15th, 17th,
Mission.
and Pringle at Mill Creek, and then Mission at Pringle Creek as well. And then we have a couple of categories that aren't defined yet to build safer pedestrian crossings, infill missing sidewalk locations, and replace deteriorated sidewalks. And we've worked with our oversight committee and then gone to council to develop a project selection criteria and process for that work, where we'll be selecting sites all around town to do that type of work. And that process will kick off where we ask the public to help us make sure we identify all areas that want to be considered in that starting in the new year. So go ahead to the next one, Josh. Just for upcoming construction, I mentioned McGilchrist Street. The work's going on out there right now where we essentially realign 22nd and McGilchrist, so it all comes together at a nice perpendicular intersection with a new stop traffic signal. You'll start to see road closures out there right after the first of the year for that work to go on, both for the new intersection and then later this summer to put a big culvert in just west of 22nd Street. Phases 2 and 3 will eventually improve that whole corridor from 12th to 25th. So you'll see those going on later on. That construction will basically be going on through 2027. And the designers are on board and already working on phases 2 and 3. 2024 pavement rehabilitation, or R&R is what we call it. That project will go out for bid here very soon. And it's a section of Commercial Street from Fabry Road down to the I-5 ramps where ODOT takes over jurisdiction. And then 1 block near the Civic Center on Liberty Street between Mill and Trade. And we are actually picking up a little bit of that sidewalk money I mentioned earlier, because there's an opportunity there to make to improve the existing sidewalk in front of the fire station that's pretty deteriorated from the tree roots out. So we're picking that up as part of that project because it'll be more efficient. 2025 pavement R&R is a big project out at Silverton Road. It'll actually go from 2025 through 2026 because we've got some utility work to do out there before we repave the road. There's improvements at 17th and Silverton that go along with that, and quite a bit of pedestrian crossings and sidewalk work there as well. And then the bridges I mentioned in 2025, those all 4 will be strengthened. Right now they have load restrictions on them that won't let heavier vehicles cross those bridges. We'll be able to remove those load restrictions and strengthen them so they're adequate for all types of traffic. So that's transportation. Let's move on to parks. We got a $28 million package here, and some of this work we're pushing on to kind of fill in as we try to ramp up on the bigger transportation work that I mentioned. Takes a little get into. And when I was driving up here this morning, I was thinking, in the spirit of the holidays, it could almost be like a 12 days of Christmas, and this is the list of things you get, but you don't want to listen to me sing, so I won't do that. But we are placing 10 playgrounds, 10 playground equipment locations all throughout town, 4 new restrooms at different parks, new or replacing existing, five locations, 5 locations where we're rehabbing existing athletic courts. We have a similar category for path and trail rehabilitation, where we're working with the committee right now to develop a process for selecting parks where we go out and fixed paths and trails that have been rehabilitated, similar to what I mentioned for sidewalks and pedestrian crossings earlier. Sports fields upgrades at 3 locations, 2 new dog parks, 4 new park shelters, and the first project that's going out for construction bidding next month is resurfacing the parking lots out of Minto Brown Park, where the dog park is, and then the main parking lot further to the river. So next slide, Josh. Just talking about what's coming up next. The Minto Brown work that I mentioned, there's a couple of pictures there that are kind of hard to see here, but shows the pavement work that will happen out there. Athletic courts at Highland, Morningside, and Sumter will be in 2024, and then Hoover and River Road to follow in 25. Work starting out at Gear Park in 25. We have a grant for the skate park, and the bond funds new shelters, rehabbing the sports fields out there, and the dog park. McKay School Park is another place where we'll be kicking off in 2025 with sports fields, shelter, and new restrooms. And then our first 2 playgrounds in 25 also at Livingston and Morningside Park. Brian mentioned the Civic Center, earthquake safety. So almost $40 million there. And that work is for primarily to retrofit the structure to a life safety objective so that the building will withstand a large earthquake and everybody inside can shelter in place and then exit safely. It also includes new roof, new windows, which will greatly help the energy efficiency of that building, and some money to revitalize Peace Plaza between the library and the Civic Center. As Brian mentioned, and we're presenting some planning work to the council on Monday night to talk about work that we've done over the last 8 months to really shape how we want to use the building in the future, and use this construction project as an opportunity to make sure that we don't do anything that precludes our future plans for the building, and take advantage of any opportunities that when we're tearing the thing apart, we put it back. So we're going to present that pre-design work to council Monday night, and then come back in January with a request to use a design build process like Brian mentioned, so we can bring a contractor in immediately and start collaborating with them and the designer to figure out the most efficient way and cost-effective way to do this work and make it go as far as possible on this building, kind of like we did with the library renovation a few years ago. So that work kicks off next year, and if all goes well, we can actually accelerate the construction a little faster than we planned, which will also save us money if we can start sooner in 2025. Last thing I just wanted to mention, working with the chamber, we have an event planned on January 31st to really dive into more details about projects and how contractors who are interested can get involved. I want to mention Shawna Self, who is from our procurement department, is an excellent resource for that kind of thing. She keeps me out of trouble, but she's also very helpful for folks who are looking to do Salem work. And so she's a great contact kind of thing. We use Oregon Buys, the state procurement system, for all of our bids. And you can track progress of the bond on cityofsalem.net. We have a project map there, a rough schedule of when to expect projects, and all the oversight committee materials, video recordings, and everything that we share with that group. So quick overview. Happy to answer any questions. I have the full schedule. And if there's any projects that you have specific interest in, I have business cards. You're always welcome to contact me afterwards, and I can put you in contact with. Thanks very much, everyone.
You mentioned Marine Drive again.
Yeah.
I remember previous bonds that we were sold on, that never happened. Is this one of those cases where it's planned but not going to happen again?
No, it's planned and it's going to happen. We've got a significant chunk of money in there to go from Harrod down to Fifth, I think it is. So a long stretch, and we've actually already started work out there, acquiring property. We just did some demolition work to prepare the way. So there's a lot in front of that project. Some of it's outside the urban growth boundary, so we've got work to do with Polk County to make sure we go through the correct process to build the road. But it's definitely in our plans, and a big chunk of funding of that 92 million is towards that project.
Or 77% local designers and businesses. What's the projection? How much of that percentage is saved?
So I don't have an exact number for you. I hope we can keep it in that neighborhood. One of the biggest issues in the design community right now is not necessarily capability, but availability. And so we did a lot of work, especially right after the bond passed, talking with consultants about what's coming and trying to get projects on their radar, because just like us, they're stretched with all the work that's out there and trying to deliver everything. And for us, we want capable, competent, we want their A teams, not their C teams, right? So that communication work is what we're doing. There are lots of folks here in town that can do most of this work. It's not, I mean, it's complex, but it's not complicated, if that makes sense. And so that's our main tool, is to communicate with what's coming, share the schedule with the folks that we work with so they know what's coming, if it's on their radar to propose on. So everybody knows. I think most folks know this, but we have to select consultants based on their qualifications. And so that's the process we go through, a request for proposals, and they submit, and we pick the most qualified team. So hopefully we can keep it in that range that we showed there, but it'll just depend on availability more than anything.
You look at who is paying the bond prices, it's predominantly south and west. They're picking up a large share of the bond increases. How do you go out to show what they're getting for the money? How would it show south and west? These are meaningful things that are going to make your lives better. That's why you should support the bond. What are you going to use to sell it to people in south and west?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is just present exactly our program for how the work is distributed, and the parks work, is spread throughout town. Some of those large urban standard projects like Davis Road are in those sectors of town. So I think it's just sharing, here's what's happening and when, and part of how we structured the sequence of the projects has to do with when the money comes in and how to keep our cash flow equivalent with the bond funding coming in. So some of those projects do push further back, but I think it's just sharing, here's what you're getting, what you're going to get and when, and showing that it's distributed all throughout town.
Hi, thank you for being here. Quick question, when was that RFP application last updated?
RFP application.
Or like the application, is it something that is state written or city written?
Yeah, it's city written, and we use a number of different tools. So for specific projects, we write a specific RFP. For contractors, where we actually bid a contract for public improvements, as Brian mentioned, that's a slightly different process where the project's designed, we publish the plans, and we receive bids, and typically the lowest bidder is the one that's selected. That process, we update our specs and our contract language fairly frequently, but it's been pretty much the same with just minor tweaks for a long time.
A long time.
I don't know, Sean, do you have any information on that?
For the recent staffing and engineering augmentation that we're going to be receiving bond money for, we went out and did that fairly recently.
But usually it's the lowest bid, is that what you're doing?
So two different things. For consultants, designers, it's qualifications. For contractors who are actually doing the construction, it's typically lowest bid.
Yeah, maybe contextually, because I did a couple calls from our members after City Council earlier 2 weeks ago. And I know Dan Atchison would be, of course, the letter of the law on this, but could you give an overview to this group about the qualifications of how a bidder is selected? I think it was very surprising for a few people that there is no legally allowed local preference, and how we got to that.
Well, that's compliance with state law. It's not a local decision to obviously preclude local vendors for participating in any purchasing process. As Alan has said, local vendors have done very well in our prior bond programs. I think it's around 67% of previous bond programs where local vendors have been successful in competing for those projects. We anticipate the same going forward, but it is an open and competitive process, open to all vendors literally throughout the country. When you start talking about projects the size of the city hall renovations, that will likely attract vendors, contractors from, throughout the Pacific Northwest, if not the country, to look at a project of that scale. Obviously, as you go down in the magnitude of the project, you get a different level of interest. I suspect things like paving the dog parks will be definitely local vendors. But again, it's a competitive process and we're required to use a competitive process. That's where we are.
If I could just add a couple things to that. So one of our biggest tools that we can use is communication, kind of like I was describing before, is making sure that we're talking with the local community about what's coming. And that's where this event on the 31st, where you're all helping us out, will go a great deal to just help make sure that everybody around knows what's coming and it's on their radar to bid. And the more folks that are interested in putting in bids, the better competition, the better off we all are. So I think that's the biggest thing for us is making sure that the word is out and that we can answer questions and folks know how to get involved so that the way is paved as smooth as possible for all the local contractors and vendors to be involved. And have a fair footing in the process that Keith described. And then the other thing is, even for the bigger jobs, like Keith mentioned, like the City Hall project, the bulk of that work is subcontracted. The general contractor will do some work, but the bulk of it is subcontracted. And that's where we've had really good success working with whoever our partner is to make sure they're engaged with the local subcontractor community, doing exactly what I just talked about, making sure that word is out and those folks are poised and ready to bid when those subcontracts become available. And that's where Keith mentioned, like with our new ops building, we had 65% of that subcontract work all went to local contractors. So
I'd add one more thing. The last big bond which covered streets was the 2008 Streets and Bridges bond. We tracked that all the way through. That was about 80% all told. That program. A lot of contractors that in that targeting sell out that work, and it makes sense. It's too expensive to ship products from that area as well. So, to see that we're at 77% now on those types of projects is kind of right in line with what we saw with the 2008 Streets and Bridges program.
Any other questions on the infrastructure bond elements here? Thank you.
thank you.
Well, move on to the Alternative Revenue Task Force piece here.
You want to say first? No? Okay, we'll just jump in. I'm sure all of you, all council meetings, and watch them live. If you don't, we've been talking about a revenue task force the last 2 weeks and again on the 11th. And this is really what we're looking at going forward is on the right, you'll see the revenue task force and what we're looking at for their going forward. On the left, you'll see our annual budget process, budget committee, and really we're separating those two different tracks. One is talking about reductions and budget and fitting everything into revenues. On the right side is looking at that revenue stream. There is going to be some connection between the two groups. And overall, City Council is going to be looking at the overall target for what we're trying to gain with revenue going forward. It's really a big process. We're getting approval from council, hopefully on the charter for the revenue task force on Monday. They're also looking at a draft application that's going to come open right after that. So on the 11th, we're looking at approval and hopefully opening applications on 12th or 13th. And we'll touch back on that in just a second. The basis of that is a general fund challenge. For those of you that don't, it funds police, fire, public safety, recreation, library, land use planning, zoning, code enforcement. some social services, municipal court. This says other services to provide a citywide benefit. That's things like finance or city manager's office or human resources. Those also live in the general fund. This is not your water utility. This is not building and safety where building permits come from. This is really focused on the general fund. For the general fund, just talking about property taxes, the majority of our revenue is property taxes, I think just barely at 50 or 51%. Of those dollars, it only covers 77% of the police and fire budgets. A lot of people assume that property taxes covers everything that we do, and it really doesn't. It used to cover more, but it's really been a declining resource overall. So 77% of the police and fire cost. And then last year, fiscal year 2023, the city used 4.1 million in fund balance, or the city's checking account. I would call that a structural imbalance where we're spending more than we're bringing in. We're bringing down that checking account balance, that fund balance. It's not sustainable going forward. And we are expecting that 4.1 to increase. And I'm not going to speculate on what that increase is. There's a lot of numbers that get out there. I really want to wait. We're in the midst of a financial forecast update that will be delivered on January 10th. And that's when we'll really talk with council about what that deficit looks like going forward. Just real quick, we're talking about two different budgets. So the current year, we're in fiscal year 2024. So we operate on a July 1st to 30th fiscal year. So we're actually looking at amending the 24 budget and eliminating 41 vacant positions on February 12th with the city council. That'll help set the baseline for the 25 budget process that really kick off very soon in January with that forecast. And then the budget committee convenes in April to look at that budget going forward, and then the city council adopts it in June. The revenue task force, this is the scope of what we're looking at. This is part of their charter that'll be approved. We're looking at 20 to 30 members, 8 to 12 meetings. I think hopefully more on the 8 side than the 12 side, but we'll see how it goes. And we're really hoping for robust community process. In addition to the membership, we're looking at 8 focus groups and 2 open house town hall type events. We're really hoping to drive community members in to provide engagement on this topic, looking at different revenue sources and giving their feedback. And save the dates. Here's the list of things that are coming up. All of this will be on the city website. I'm happy to share these slides also, and we can get them out to you. But a lot going on. It's going to be a busy next 6-7 months for the city council, revenue task force, the budget committee, just a lot of things going on. This is a little detail on the amendment to the 2020 budget to the 41 positions we're looking at reducing. For the reduction scenarios, if you go back to September and October, we've been looking at this first round, they're vacant positions. So we've been intentionally holding them vacant. And so we can kind of start fiscal year 2025 with a fresh base budget. It looks kind of funky right now with all these positions in the books, but hired. Okay. I think that's the last slide, so I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
There's
My
no
fault.
Questions?
I thought it was one of those tables with arms that look like that, and I was like kicking my leg out. It was like, bam.
I feel your pain.
No.
I have a question.
Yeah.
That last slide you showed us, that is your comprehensive adjustment for the effort that didn't pass, but this will be the adjustment to the budget in lieu of?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. Not quite. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna solve for year one. So just like all of you, you're anticipating increases in costs going forward, right? Each year your costs go up. The same happens for the city. So what we're doing is, through the budget committee, we're looking at each year one at a time, right? So this will help us solve the current year and going into 25. Additional adjustments will have to be made going forward to make it sustainable. Even with these vacant positions, we've seen some pretty unprecedented ongoing vacant positions like in the police department. Even with all these vacant positions last year, we still used $4.1 million. And I expect that to be greater this year. So that's why even with these vacant positions, we're still anticipating a challenge. This just helps clean up kind of the slate going forward. We'll have to look at additional reductions or revenue to solve the problem. Each year, it'll really be each year at a time. What we're hoping for is kind of developing with City Council, Budget Committee, the Revenue Task Force is kind of a financial roadmap going forward to map out the next several years.
Question, and I think it's the first time we're looking at this, but I could be wrong. There was discussion about compensation for people serving on the Alternative Revenue Task Force. We have some thoughts on that, but this is including a possibly paying of childcare and the like. Well, hold my editorial. So is this the first time we're considering paying people to serve on a committee?
Certainly in my tenure, yeah.
From a bigger perspective, if I'm not mistaken, we have, is it 28 boards and commissions?
I don't know the exact, that feels a little light to me.
It's a lot. I just worry about the precedent you're setting now for every other board and commission that have never been compensated for their volunteer time. And now we're bringing a group in that will be compensated, and what that means for the future of serving as a volunteer community member on boards and commissions.
That may be a good question for our council members to respond to. Certainly from a financial perspective, there is a financial impact. We're anticipating that impact in our budget request that will go to City Council on the 11th. We've programmed that into the overall ask. None of this is free. We are asking for a $300,000 appropriation to provide for consulting services to help us manage this process. And then, of course, the paying the committee members is included in that number, and facilitating the Spanish language translation and the American Sign Language translation as well for those meetings. But as far as the why did that occur, I'll let Councilmember respond to that one.
I can answer some of that. One of the things with a lot of our, and thank you for the question, I really appreciate it, because that does bring up some concerns looking down the road. One of the challenges we have is even filling positions on our boards and commissions, because people don't have the time, they're busy, there's childcare, there are expenses associated with it. And also we'd like to see those more diverse, and the applicants, the folks that are serving on those committees, to be more diverse. And so this was brought up as a means of addressing that, so that we can get the diversity on the committee. And this stipend, at least as we discussed at the meeting, it's folks don't have to take it. It's available there to help get over that barrier if income or is really truly a barrier, because we're asking for a lot of meetings and a lot of time in a very short period of time. And we would like to have a broad representation on this committee. Does that make sense?
I want to make sure I'm hearing correct. So is it to provide access or to provide diversity on the committee?
To provide, to make it more available for people where money is a restraint, basically, for them being able to come serve all these hours on the task force. I mean, if you have to come to a meeting, you don't have childcare. We're not providing the childcare, but there's the option of them where they could pay to have the kids, you know, taken care of so that they could attend the meetings.
A time of extreme equity lens on everything. I don't see how we are not now gonna commit, if we do it at that committee, not lock yourself for absolutely every single city committee, because wouldn't you as a citizen then, or a resident, if I was sitting on another committee, say, well, I'd like to get paid for my time too. I worry about where this could go because the boards and commissions explicitly say on the website that volunteer positions. And as volunteers, we take, and this is a perspective, we choose to donate our time to certain things, and we are all told, I don't think it's a certain segment of our population that has limited time and resources. I think that's community wide, and I just worry that if we're now committing ourselves to a new format, wouldn't rightfully each other group now be able to come to the city and say, hey, we'd like the same considerations in the equity lens?
No, that's something that we're going to have to discuss because it does seem to be more and more of a barrier over time. And it's not, I mean, a stipend, you can be a volunteer and still get a stipend, just like commissioners on boards, a lot of different areas. You know, they provide stipends to help with those additional expenses. But yeah, we need to have that conversation. And I know we are reorganizing, revamping, looking at our boards and commissions and what they do and so that they can be more helpful, provide more recommendations, interface more with the council. And so this discussion is coming up.
Looks like we've got a question online here. Pelmore Green, if you've got a question, we'd be happy to hear it.
Good morning, and thank you all for taking time to be here. My apologies for not being able to be there in person this morning. I would just like to make a comment concerning the payment of the boards or stipends for members on boards and commissions. So the state went to this model, I think it was last session, there was a bill that was passed that for the same purposes that Councilor woman Varney was sharing, or Stapleton, excuse me, you know, to increase participation for communities that perhaps don't have the same ability to participate as other members of the community. It would be very interesting to contact the state and see how that has rolled out and whether or not the composition of their boards and commissions has changed over time, because those are primarily appointments from the governor. So just putting that out there for general information moving forward. Thanks again for your service.
Just as someone who serves on a governor's planning board, there is an opportunity for a stipend, but you have to qualify for it. So there are certain, well, not everyone qualifies for the stipend.
Okay.
Josh, you had a question, and this might be a completely ignorant question, but I thought I heard you say, and I'm sorry, I can't see the screen super clearly from here, that our property tax revenue is dropping. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I could talk a lot more about that. I'll try to limit it to just a couple minutes. It's not declining overall, but as a percent of revenue in the general fund, it's declining. So it used to cover more services and now it covers less. It never quite covered all of police and fire. I look back to through 2002, which is kind of readily available data, and it didn't cover the cost of police and fire then, but it was much closer, more in the 95% range. Now it's at 77%. So
Okay, I saw that. So how, I mean, it's just, you're getting less of that, income, not revenue from the general fund, but it's just going to other places, is that what you can say?
Not necessarily. So over the years, different revenues have had to come in to make up for it. The biggest one would be the city operations fee. So as property taxes hasn't kept up with expenditure needs, the city operations fee was introduced. That's helped plug the gap in the short term. That was since 2020. That's probably the biggest example, but property taxes, measures 5 and 50 really limits the growth. We see about 3% from existing properties, another 1.1 to 1.4 for new development, which is actually pretty good. Some cities don't see that. Other cities see a lot more. So around 4.5%. So if our expenses go up even a little bit above 4.5%, that's where you see those lines cross.
Thank you.
So, my name is Jonathan Castro, and what I'm about to share, I'd like to mention, I'm sharing as Jonathan Castro resident, and I was the chairman of commerce running my businesses. So I actually started getting involved with the boards and commissions with the city when I was 19. And the reason why I got involved is because someone reached out and said, hey, you should serve. Hey, at the time, I was going to college, working, had what was my son back then, 2-year-old kid, and I was actually illegally. So it's actually illegal immigrants. They didn't have papers. Money was not necessarily even a thought. It was more about someone reaching out to me and giving me or encouraging me to apply. So money is not an issue for the right people. Okay, it's about actually reaching out. Now I'd like to make it common because I served since I was 19, and I think it's real interesting that you are considering this. Because I actually had a conversation with Chris Lloyd. I think Stahley was heard some of the conversation we had, and that was getting the Hispanic community engaged, being one of the largest minorities. So I said, hey, we need to create a Hispanic advisory commission, and I'm willing to do the legwork and go meet with the different corners of the Hispanic community. I asked Mayor Hoy, who do you want me to meet? He gave me different organizations. Went out, did the work, had a large pool of Hispanic community leaders ranging from the Hispanic Union, the Cocoon, to the faith community, business community, everyone. And I sent out all the information after I interviewed everyone, and I never heard back from the mayor, never even gotten a reply from my email. And that's where before we start looking at giving people money or handouts to serve, we first need to, one, reach out to those communities, and two, have some respect for those who are willing to do the work. I spent a lot of hours. Now I'm a business owner, I own multiple businesses. I didn't even get a reply from Mayor Boyd. Irma was ceased on that. And also,
They're gonna be in here, I think, at 8 to do.
what was that?
Somebody was unmuted, sorry.
Okay, so my message here, and thank you for your service, and I'm not necessarily mad at the mayor, he's a busy guy, but my message is you don't need to give any money out. You need to reach out to people, and when you do reach out, just have the courtesy to respond and follow through. I reached out to a very diverse group, some people who were in my same shoes when I first started serving. Money was not an issue. It was just the opportunity to get together as a community and do something good. But the problem we have, the big barrier we have still, there's no response from the mayor. That's my thought. And please follow up on that.
Well, I just wanted to say things have changed in the last 10 years economically. I know a lot, especially with childcare in the last couple of years, actually since the pandemic. Those costs have definitely gone up. In terms of the list that you developed, I mean, I really appreciate the work that you did putting together the list. But you said leaders in the community, right? And representatives. I think we're trying to target that neighbor next door as well. in terms of getting their participation and their voice on this committee. The ones that don't jump into those leadership positions automatically, and reaching out to ones that don't maybe not show up at all those meetings or whatever. So that's part of the purpose behind it, is to reach out to those that might not be in that service kind of mode.
It just seems
Okay.
to me, you know, I dedicated a lot of my time, even when I didn't have the means to do so at a very young age. It just seems to me, and I may be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but it seems to me that sometimes it's about getting the people who you know, who are your people, or, you know, whoever the majority is. I think that's the wrong way to, for anything, you know, I have felt that the boards and commissions have changed from 10 years ago, and it's more about who can we plug in that will preach our philosophy.
Okay.
I mean, the mayor doesn't even have the courtesy to respond to me, you know.
If I may, Jonathan, I am 100% with you. And as a city councilor, I commit to you to follow up and see what we can do about further engagement with that community, because I really think that we're failing in that regard. And Micki, to your point, I believe that the folks that Jonathan is talking about do have difficulty stepping forward.
Okay.
Because they're not heard, and they don't feel seen, and they're not engaged. So I respect the effort, Jonathan, and I commit to helping you with that.
Thank you.
One more there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna add that, somebody noted that we were, and are planning on doing some work on our boards and commissions. Commissioner Varney mentioned that, and, you know, here's another opportunity for us to look at, you know, how we connect with a significant portion of our community. Is a Hispanic Advisory Committee. Is that the best way to do that? And that can be part of those considerations going forward. So.
It'd be a good place to start, I think, to acknowledge, you know, where we set out. I mean, we have people from the school district, Olga Cobb, who step forth, and they keep asking me, and I say, hey, the mayor hasn't responded, and I talked to him, and he says he'll get back to us, but it's already been, this was back in January 2023. It's almost a year already, and I don't know what to say, and I
think that we give the mayor an opportunity to reply, certainly, and he's been very responsive. I think most times, and I will personally take on some follow-up between you and I on that, Jonathan, so we see where that sits. We need to make sure we get all the questions answered, though, about all the groups and any other interests on this committee itself, or things that you're uncomfortable with, things that you'd like to share. We have a couple of counselors here. We have the city manager's office.
I guess I had a question about the overall scope cost, right? So you mentioned that 300,000 is kind of projected, but not you're gonna task force cost. This upcoming meeting is what I think I heard a minute ago, and kind of doing the math there. If this participation he goes through, that would be about 36,000. So the consulting and language assets, it's costing the 264,000. 300,000.
I can take that one. So about 120,000 is our third-party consultant just to facilitate the task force. 12 meetings, it's a lot of logistics. They'll be preparing a lot of the materials. We also have a polling consultant, community engagement consultant. And then we have just language translation for Spanish and ASL. That's an average of about $3,000 a meeting. It's quite expensive. And then the stipend, $100 per member. It's about 30,000 of the budget. I really hope that we don't need 12 meetings and we can bring that down. And then food and other meeting support for the task force. So there's a breakdown in the staff report that's out there for Monday.
And so back to the local question we kind of talked about before with the other projects, are these consultants and these kind of holding services available? consultants involved there?
So Moss Adams, they have local engagements. I don't know where this branch is headquartered. They're a national organization. So they have an audit arm. You know, this side is on their consulting side. We've used them for several years, but they're not located here in Salem.
Any other questions for our group here?
Thank you again for being here. I'm sure it's not that long we was early in all the questions that are coming at you. I've heard a couple of different things from different people out in the community. Can you tell me what was the surplus on the general fund for the last fiscal year? Because the way I read it, I believe it was 40 million. Is that true or not?
I appreciate the question. So I really struggle with the term surplus. So I would reference that as fund balance or your checking account. So that's some people will call it a carryover. So it's funds that carry over from one year to another. So the last 3 years, we've seen a pretty unprecedented amount of federal relief. So CARES Act, ARPA funding. We used a significant portion of that for revenue replacement in the general fund that has really gotten us to this point where we're not in panic emergency mode. We actually have a little bit of time. We're looking at eliminating vacant positions. We're looking at eliminating filled positions. So you're correct about 40 million going into last year. When I reference using 4.1 of that last year. So you are correct. And then the 4.1 was the use of that fund balance.
Hey, Josh, just to clarify, we don't maintain a fund balance just because we like to hoard our resources. There are reasons why you maintain a fund balance. As you know, anybody in this room probably doesn't have a zero balance in their checking account going forward. I hope not. Going forward on a month-to-month basis. We have to look forward as to what our revenue flow is throughout the course of the year, and we have to maintain sufficient revenue in our bank account in order to pay our expenses when we're not receiving revenues, particularly in the months of August, September, October, before we receive our ad valorem tax revenues, our property tax revenues from the collector. So it's not just, let's hoard our funds and, like Donald Duck rolling around in the cash in the vault. It's there for a specific reason. And it's one of the drivers of our bond rating. The reason why the city of Salem has a strong bond rating is that we've been fiscally conservative and that we've operated within certain parameters that the bond companies look at, the rating agencies look at, and one of them is what is your reserve? What is your capacity to deal with unanticipated expenditures? And we are well positioned, but not overly well positioned for that. And as Josh has indicated, as we look out over time, the reason why we're having a revenue task force is that that position continues to erode as we look into the future. Our expenses are increasing at a rate that's greater than our revenue generation, and it is just a natural structural gap that will occur if we don't do something about it. So our options are pretty simple and basic. They are reduce our expenses and in the city, reducing expenses means reducing our payroll, reducing the number of positions that we have in the city, or increasing revenues. Those are our two options.
And I do thank you guys all for being here. Brandon Blair. One of my questions on that, on the revenue task force, does the task force also have the ability to look through the budget, look through those expenses, and give opinions based off of, do people outside of the city look at where some of those funds are spent and maybe allocate more resources to police and fire first, and then circle back to?
So thanks, Brandon. As Josh said in the sort of his intro slide, we've got two tracks going on this year. One is looking at our budget and our annual budget. We'll be adjusting our annual budget in February to eliminate 42 positions? 41 positions from the budget to reduce our expenditures. And then going forward, we have the budget committee that will be receiving, the budget committee, of course, consists of city council and 9 citizen representatives. They'll be receiving the revenue forecast on January 10th, which basically kicks off our annual budget process. We're anticipating that the gaps that we have been talking about will continue to exist there, and that the budget committee will be responsible for looking at both the current year's budget and looking into the future for whatever reductions are necessitated. We started those conversations with city council shortly after the the petition was filed. We started those conversations back in August with city council about what cuts will be necessary in order to maintain our fund balance requirements. And the budget committee will continue those conversations over the course of the next 6 months, ultimately resulting in the adoption of a 24 or fiscal year 25, which runs from July 1, 2024 to June 30th of 2025. And that budget will definitely be a reduced budget from what we have this year.
And I would add one additional thing. So the budget committee recommends that budget to the city council. Ultimately, the city council is responsible for adopting that budget. Once they get that budget, they could rearrange it however they'd like. So ultimately, the city council is in the driver's seat. The budget committee and the revenue task force will be advising them.
And I think just as a follow-up, perception on the outside, looking at what goes on, I think with the city and the residents of Salem, when you look at, we brought up the property tax, obviously it's capped at a 3% growth rate for a reason. And part of that reason long ago was to protect us as homeowners. And yet, we have issues, we run into high inflationary environments like we've seen. We saw it now, we saw it back in the late 70s and early 80s. Those periods of time correct themselves. So I think, what we as citizens look for is that balance between perception, again, this perception that the answer is always just additional revenue, right? That's always the answer, is the perception behind the scenes. I think being able to work with, a very diverse background within these task force. And I think our strength is really diversity of thought, right? People coming from different walks and actually not being able to agree with each other on some things, but being heard at the table. And I think there are some people in the community that feel like their voice is never heard. And I think coming together with that group and understanding this balance of revenue and expenses, because I'll tell you, on the outside, the perception is there are some areas that could be trimmed that are not. But I think more transparency, the better for you all.
Thanks.
Just quick comment on the police and fire. And when we were looking at those, there was a slide that showed 6 full-time positions for police and 6 for both fire, vice versa. When you're looking at this couple for the library, it would seem to me, if I'm on city council, the last thing I'm going to do is get rid of public safety full-time positions. It doesn't make sense to me on any level that the city would not look at other things. I understand that there's a task force that then gives it to the city council, but I'm speaking, I guess, to the city councilors that are here, that it makes sense to me that the number one, in my opinion, task of a city is public safety first. And if I was on city council and I received the budget and said, we're gonna get rid of some police before we get rid of some other things, for fire would not go well for me. I mean, I would not vote for that. Just 2 cents. And then going back, if I could, on paying people to be on the task on this task force, and then if you were to extrapolate that and look at every commission, every board, every task force, for eventually what I believe the intent is for city council and the mayor to be paid have we looked at, has anyone done the numbers to say, well, we're gonna pay everyone $100 per meeting? If I heard you correctly, Josh, what would that be, or how would that increase the budget at the same time we're talking about we don't have any money? Have you done any math, or is there a quick way to just kind of say, well, we have 100 people that do boards and commissions, and not trying to put you on the spot, I just don't know the answer.
I haven't run the math. I have a similar concern, right? Anytime you start something new, it's always, you know, I look at the finances first, so yes, it's a concern. But ultimately council sets that policy.
Sure. So Micki, you being here, and if you guys looked at, what would that be if it ends up being every board commission, the slippery slope of this in 3 years, all of a sudden, we're not getting the people that we want, we have to pay more money, or all the A groups, I mean, everyone that.
Sure.
Do you know what the number is of how many boards and commission volunteers are in the city? I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't currently, I mean, I don't know. That's something that we could get a number of. I'm really curious to see what has happened with the state after the passage of, you know, I'd like to see how that's impacted the diversity on their boards and commissions, et cetera. Out of curiosity, obviously, I thought that was a really good suggestion.
And to follow up another level of that, after, if it went past 7 meetings and somebody accepted the 100 per meeting, are we now independent contractors where we're gonna actually have to file that income? So
They do have to file
after 760, yeah, that's CPA.
So
600.
600. So now I would say, hold on, I don't want to serve on that because that goes to 6 meetings. Now I have to report the income. This to me is not as simple as getting equity or diverse opinions around the table. I hope you really think about the financial impact, because if it starts here under the equity lens, you need to expect that every other group is going to come forward and say, we need the same and equal treatment.
Yeah.
We are volunteers as well. And with Nina and I were just talking, we're going to run a little of the fake math on this, try and gauge how often they meet. I think there's a lot of permutations of this that get extremely complicated. And if for some reason you're somebody who's sitting on more than one commission, which you have a number of people on there, I mean, this could be a major financial hit that they'd say, no, I'm not volunteering anymore because now I'm putting myself in a new tax bracket. And it does not take a lot to shift between those. So, well.
So after serving on a lot of city committees and now trying to fill county positions, it's not so much as money, it's just trying to find the people that have a career or a job with flexibility that can have that time off. So many people punch a time card, commit 5 that would love to be serving on these committees. But a lot of those meetings will happen early up in the morning or late in the evening, and then they have family commitments with children and daycare and everything else you're chasing down. But it's not so much about money, but there's such a small pot of people that have the ability and the flexibility to make it to it. And that's your biggest challenge, is trying to find the ones that have it, they're willing. And I think the best thing you can do is outreach. Find ways to advertise. I'm not sure how you can do it. Facebook, I mean, right now the internet is the quickest way to outreach. But what I found is when you start putting the word out, and most of it's word of mouth, is the people that are already serving, know people that have time and flexibility in career, they're willing to serve. I have people that kick me because I drug them in. I have people that kick because they drug me in. But if you're going to make a difference and have a successful community in that diversity, it's going to take a lot of outreach. And the word of mouth is by far your best asset. I don't think money is going to change events.
I'm just going to go tell it on that. I'm sorry, I didn't say something. Go ahead. No. Perfect. Sounds like it's there. Yeah. I'm just going to say that I feel like there's a bigger problem in our community that we're not going to solve in this room. We're not going to solve it with money. And that's just apathy for our system currently. And I'm not sure, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations internally about how do we get more people involved? I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not sure that it's money. And by the way, I got a full disclosure, I'm one that kicked a while for getting involved. Years ago.
Got one on online. Sadie, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Sadie Carney, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here representing the Chariots Board. I'd love to be there in person, but I have RSV, so I'm pretty sure you're grateful I'm not. And I just wanted to make a comment or two about the compensated participation. I don't know how many people in this room are aware that we do have a compensation model that works for the Chariots Board. I think I won't be able to adequately represent all of the details, but there is kind of a financial cap. So if you are a Chariots Board member that earns over a certain amount, you don't qualify for the stipended compensation. But we did put that in place to increase kind of accessibility to a more diverse group that might have issues. You know, our meetings are all in the evening, you know, not this one, obviously, and I'm here representing the board, but childcare costs were an issue, you know, transportation to the meeting. Of course, we all get bus passes, but sometimes depending on where people live, that can be a real time commitment, which again leads to the cost. And some of our board members don't work a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5 job, right? They're working different shift work. And so sometimes participation in the meeting is lost income. And so those are the things we were trying to address. But to the previous comment, you know, I do think that offering volunteers, committees that contribute, you know, in some cases, substantial amounts of time and effort, and bring their expertise to these different committees, you know, recognizing that value sort of demonstrates a respect for the dedication and recognize the value that they bring to our community. And I think that there is some evidence that points to the fact that when you do compensate people for their time, you get people that are approaching these, you know, volunteer tasks more reliably, consistently performing, you know, like sort of furnishing deliverables on time, participating fully, showing up at every meeting. And I think, you know, I think respecting people's time and effort that way. I work for the state of Oregon. We are working in our rulemaking capacity, which is writing new laws for the state to find ways to compensate people that might not otherwise be able to participate. In particular, we contract with community-based and community-serving organizations. So like one that was mentioned earlier in this meeting that could be an example is Piccoon. So setting up a contract with Piccoon where Piccoon will say, okay, we will take this money and we will make sure we have a representative show up at all of these meetings to contribute from this perspective. We find it's a really valuable way of getting a more inclusive perspective in the decisions that we're making. And it really, it kind of democratizes the process in a way that we haven't been able to by just asking people who felt they had the time and ability to volunteer their time to show up and participate. So I think I applaud the city for taking these steps and considerations in increasing equitable participation in our decision making. So I just wanted to speak up on behalf of the board and share what I know. So thanks.
I'd like to just make one comment. Again, just disclosure, this is from Jonathan Castro, not the chamber, not my business. But when I look at the board, and I appreciate what Sadie shared, I really do. But the reality is, you know, to my previous comments, when you go look at the board here, the Chariots, it's only one side of the ideological aisles. And I know there's people, and they're all good people, very good people, but they'll think of that. And that's a problem. We need diversity of ideologies, of thoughts. Go look up, I encourage everyone to look up who the current board members are.
You have time?
One more. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say in response to your question, Jeff Miller, Thank you for kicking me into the pond here. But I really do believe that public safety should be funded first. And that's one of my goals. I am super curious to work with the budget committee to figure out how we can change the way the budget is worked to kind of meet that need, being that we're in a crisis situation in Salem and safety is great concern and a lot of people feel unsettled. And when people feel unsettled, bad things start to happen. When people aren't engaged, gun violence goes up in Northeast Salem. And we need to be paying attention to those kinds of things. I think that if the city is willing to change the way they operate in terms of the budget, that people will begin to pay attention. And they will notice that you're making an effort, we're making an effort to hear them and see them and prioritize accordingly. I think if you are willing to bend like that and make it possible for more to happen, I think apathy will morph and become engagement because we're sincerely making an effort. And as to compensation, I volunteer because I feel called to do so. I don't, and my family has sacrificed for decades as volunteers. We choose to do that. And I know it's not possible for everyone, but if it is, and it's truly something that you feel called to do, then the sacrifices need to be made, I believe, to participate. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Yeah, I really want to thank our group here for joining us this morning. It's really important, bro. I thought we were going to be able to let you go for a minute there at like 7:40. We made it all the way to the end. So thank you again. The opportunity to have these conversations is really important here. Also, as it being December, heading into the holidays and the end of the year, I want to thank a lot of folks for being here with us throughout this whole program this year. Really enjoy the opportunity to have these discussions and to our chair of the committee, Jonathan Castro, and the co-chairs group that goes into making this work. We're going to keep it going next year, January. I think we're back here with discussion about the short session, I think from a lobbying perspective. So I hope we'll get the chance to see everybody back here again next year. And between then and now, I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season and a great new year. So thank you.
Thank you.